I don't usually do this kind of thing, but I'd fallen behind in my studies. I've always been an honor roll student. I had some B's here and there, but mostly fantastic grades. I wasn't big into extracurricular activities, but I was a library assistant, and I did a little volunteer work for the required hours I needed to graduate. That all changed when I turned 17. My parents had gotten me a car for my birthday. Nothing fancy, but 4 wheels and an engine is always nice. But it came with a caveat. If I wanted to drive it, I needed to pay the insurance on it. This led me to pick up a job, which led to a lot of closing shifts at my local fast food chain and not a lot of time for studying or doing homework. So when Mr. Castleberry told me I was going to fail 12th grade English if I didn't bring my grades up, I asked him if there wasn't something we could do to work this out. I admit extra credit, maybe a makeup assignment or retake a test, but it seemed he had other ideas. He looked around as if what we were going to talk about was likely to get him in trouble, and then he scribbled something on a piece of paper and handed it to me. When I asked him what it was, he told me to open it when I got to my car, not to tell anybody. He refused to say anything else about it after that, and as I sat in the front seat of my car reading the message, I was a little weirded out. I mean, you saw these sorts of situations in adult films or in the back of Hustler magazines, but you really never thought it would happen in real life. Meet me at my house at 7:30, before sunset. Be prepared to stay till dawn. I started to go back in and tell him there was no way in hell, but I needed this particular class to graduate. Who knows, maybe he just liked to hang out with his students in the middle of the night. I didn't believe that for a second, but I decided that it was worth looking into. If I wasn't comfortable with it, I could always take the bad grade and figure something else out. It worked out pretty good because I was off that night, and Mr. Castleberry lived about 15 minutes from my house. I pulled up outside his house at about 7:15 and saw him peeking out the curtains as I came up to knock. He threw the door open, looking around as if to see if I'd been followed, and then practically pulled me inside by the front of my shirt as he closed and locked the door. He threw about 4 different locks, as well as a chain, and then told me to follow him to the bedroom. I raised an eyebrow. This was a little fast, but I did as he asked and figured we would talk over the particulars once we got there. When I stepped into the bedroom, I noticed that Mr. Castleberry had an odd setup. His bed sat in the middle of a circle that I had a sneaking suspicion might be silver. The walls were covered in holy symbols, and Mr. Castleberry was finishing a circle of salt around the bed as I took it all in. He pursed his lips, clearly not sure how to begin, and sat down on the bed as he tried to figure out how to explain. We don't have a lot of time, so I'll try to be quick. I have a demon inside me, a demon that only comes out after sunset. Bull, I laughed, thinking he was joking, but his face was stone cold serious. Hand of God. That's what the circle and the salt is for. I have people I know who come and sit with me and make sure the demon doesn't escape somehow. But sometimes I have to ask my students to stand in. I just need you to sit here and watch me until dawn. After that, you'll have your A. I sighed, thinking this over. It appeared he didn't want anything sexual, but he was certainly after something weird. Mr. Castleberry had always seemed like such a normal guy. Who would have thought he was clearly some kind of weirdo who thought he was possessed by a demon or something? Whatever, I thought. An A was an A, and I needed to pass the class. Okay, so what do I do if this thing gets out? Mr. Castleberry was getting comfy in bed. There's a box beside your chair. Use what's in there. The gun is a last resort. The bullets in it are very expensive, so I hope you're a good shot. Don't call the police and don't invite anyone over. You got that? I nodded, reaching down beside the chair and finding the box as he got comfortable. Good. Sun's going down, so it won't be long. Oh, the demon will try to tempt you. Just make sure you don't listen to anything he has to say. There's earplugs in the box, but I don't recommend you use anything electronic to block him out. Why not? I asked, taking a battered old Bible and cross out of the box. The gun inside was a heavy old revolver, and It looked like it would blow a hole through a barn if I used it. There were earplugs, a spray bottle labeled HW that I assumed would hurt the demon too. When Mr. Castleberry didn't answer, I asked him again as I looked up. He was lying on the bed, arms crossed over his chest as he mouthed the words to a prayer I didn't know. He was speaking in Latin or Spanish or something, and as the sun got lower, he seemed to be fighting to finish it. His tongue was getting heavy, his words growly, and he was twitching like an epileptic. As the sun slid down the horizon and true dark overtook the town, his eyes popped open, and I heard a sound like someone popping all their vertebrae at once. He roared like a charging rhino, and his body contorted on the bed like someone being flayed alive. I jumped as he writhed on the bed, knocking over the chair as I went for the door. I needed to call the hospital. This was beyond a joke. He needed help. "No!" Mr. Castleberry forced out. "Don't leave. Stay till dawn. Only wait." But that appeared to be all I would get from Mr. Castleberry. He went limp then, falling back on the bed as a soft and satisfying growl left him. As he lay there, I watched as his chest rose and fell. What was going on with him? Was he actually possessed? I shook that thought off. I had been raised Catholic, but the older I got, the less sure I was that God even existed. If there was no God, then there was no devil, so there were no demons either. That meant that the school board was just letting someone like Mr. Castleberry teach kids with whatever mental illness he had going on, probably schizophrenia or multiple personalities or something. I didn't know, but if I had to stay here all night to get an A, then I supposed I would. I was going to be tired at work tomorrow, but I had Sunday off, so I could always recuperate then. "Ah, yes. The Sabbath is a good day to rest. It was good enough for the Almighty, at least. So I suppose it's good enough for you, too." I felt my breath stick in my throat. The voice I had heard from the bed had been as different from Mr. Castleberry's as sandpaper was to velvet. Whoever was talking sounded like the kind of people who do the kind of ASMRs that get you banned on YouTube. It was the kind of voice that lures kids into wells, kind of voice that lures women away from happy marriages, kind of voice that leaves men questioning their sexuality. I looked up to find Mr. Castleberry reclined on the bed, his head resting on his hand in what was likely supposed to be a seductive pose. His eyes were smoldering, something I hadn't thought them capable of, and his smile was predatory. He was sizing me up like a predator preparing to spring, and I felt my skin erupt in goosebumps. Mr. Castleberry? It laughed, and I felt like I should join it, but forced myself not to. "The old man has gone to bed, but you can talk to me if you want. My name is Satan." I scoffed. "No way in hell. I'm sure Satan has better things to do than bother my English teacher." "Very astute. The Spanish girl he brought in last time screamed and ran out of the room when I told her that. I see you have a thicker skin, though. You may call me Raish, and what may I call you?" I started to tell him, but I seemed to remember something about telling a demon your name and decided not to give him my real name. "Sam," I said, earning a wide, toothy grin from the imp. "Astute and cagey. I like that. So how about you break that salt circle and let me out? I'm sure we could have some fun before this old fuddy-duddy gets up." Wouldn't the silver hold you inside too?" I asked dubiously. Raish peeked over the bed and chuckled. "That crafty old duck. Who knew he could afford that much silver on a teacher's budget?
Well, no matter. If you step inside the circle, breaking it with your foot, then it isn't a circle, and I can come out. Come on. What do you say?
Found myself considering it. I had actually prepared to stand up when I realized what I was doing. I didn't really know anything about this creature, a change my mind had made from mental disease to creature, and I was just going to trust him? No, I didn't think so. I planted my bottom and shook my head. I don't think so, I said, and was surprised to find that I was almost apologetic. Ray shrugged. Of course not. Why would you release me for free? Why wouldn't you want to get something out of this after all? So what is it you want? What is this old man offering you to keep watch over me? I floundered, finally deciding on the truth. An A in his English class. It sounded lame, and when Raish laughed, I knew he had thought so too. A meaningless mark of completion. I could make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. Get you any one person, any 12 people you desire, or set you up in such a way that not graduating from school would be the least of your worries. I could do so much for you, and I don't even need to take your soul. I just need you to free me. It's been so long since I was free to roam the night, and I'm so very hungry. He had been weaving a spell around me, drawing me into his promises, but at last brought me back to my senses. What would this thing do if it got loose? Who would it hurt if it was just allowed to roam the night? I shook my head, trying to get the invasive words out of my skull, and when I turned back, Mr. Castleberry, or Raish, or whoever he was, looked disappointed.
A pity. I really could have done more for you than this old stick.
I ignored him after that, though he did not return the favor. I'd brought some books so I could work on my homework, but he was talking too much for me to concentrate. I spent a few hours trying to complete my geometry homework while he offered to help, offered to give me the answers, offered to do things I'd rather not think about, and 100 other such offers. He also threatened me, offered 1,000 different punishments for not letting him out, only to walk them back a moment later and apologize. I checked my watch as I finally closed the book and discovered it was only 10:30. I'd been at this for 3 hours and didn't seem to be going by quickly.
Only 8 more hours till sunrise, he said, guessing the source of my sighs. Plenty of time for you to change your mind.
I reached into my pocket and pulled out the earplugs, pushing them in and taking my American history homework out. 2 hours of mostly silence later, I put it away and looked up to find Raish looking at me a little too intently. I yawned, getting sleepy as I pulled out my phone and scrolled through TikTok. I couldn't hear it, and as I reached for my headphones, I remembered what Mr. Castleberry had said. He had warned me about using electronic headphones, but I figured one probably would be fine. Besides, they had noise reduction on them. That had to count for something. Raish tried to call out to me when I swapped the earplug for a headphone, but I ignored him as I popped it in. I was listening to a 2-minute story about something or another, but as I scrolled to the next one, I was surprised to find it was a live stream from a familiar room. I could see myself sitting there, face glued to the phone, but as I watched, Raish looked straight at the camera and smiled. I was infuriated. Mr. Castleberry was just live streaming himself as he scared some dumb kid of the week. In fact, the title of the stream was High School Kid Tormented by Demon, though demon was in air quotes. He had tricked me. Why would he do that?
Why, indeed?
Raish asked, staring at me through the camera as if he could see me through the phone.
What do you owe him? He made a fool of you online. What if your friends saw this? What would they think? You'd be a social outcast. Why not give them something to watch? I bet you'd love nothing more than to wrap your hands around this fool's throat and choke the life out of him. Do it. No one would know. Just walk over here and...
I was getting up, but as I took a step towards the bed, alarm bells rang in my head. Raish was messing with me. Looking back down at my phone, I could see it was just a generic TikTok shop stream. And when I looked back up, Raish was so close that his nose was pressed against the barrier.
Come on, just one more step, and you can do whatever you want to him. Kill him, kiss him, do his laundry. I don't care. Just let me out, he bellowed,
and I stumbled back into my chair as he laughed. After that, I just watched TikTok with the subtitles on. I didn't trust my ears anymore. I made it till 2, but after that, my yawns started to sneak up on me. I wished I'd brought an energy drink or something. I wasn't used to staying up this late, not regularly, and my eyes were getting heavy. I swapped over to an adventure game on my phone, but it kept slipping longer and longer the later I got. I could see Raish watching me, cat-like, as if just waiting for me to nod off. He was tricky, and I wondered if Mr. Castleberry had any coffee in his kitchen. I just had to make it a little longer, just a few more hours, and I was home free. I made it till 3:10 before I lost the fight. One moment I was running my 8-bit knight through my 100th dungeon, and the next I heard someone giggling from the bed. I looked up to find not the leering Raish, but Stephanie Morgan from my math class. She was joined by Tina Feller, Debbie Ross, and half of the cheerleading squad, whose names I was a little foggy on. They were in their underwear and seemed to be beckoning me to come join them. There were comments about long division and making a human pyramid, and as I got slowly to my feet, something seemed off. Where was Raish? He'd been there a minute ago. He might not have been present, but something in their voices as they called me to the bed reminded me of him. It was underneath their voice, something wicked and hidden, and I shook my head and snapped my eyes open not a moment too soon. I was standing at the edge of the circle again. I'd lost 20 minutes, and Raish was cursing like a sailor as he had a tantrum in the middle of the large bed. He was thrashing hard enough to jounce the frame, but not hard enough to disturb the salt. He looked at me with real scorn on his face, clearly contemplating all the terrible things he wanted to do to me.
You were so close! The booby trap always gets them!
I was wide awake now, but I knew it wouldn't last long unless I found something to focus on. 3 hours. I had 3 hours. Despite the knowledge, I smiled at the old imp. Can't trick me, Raish. No deceitful person will dwell in my house. No liar will stand in my presence. To my surprise, Raish sat back like I'd slapped him. I blinked. That was different. What? Not a big fan of scripture? Raish looked at me sardonically.
Obviously. I would prefer if you keep it to yourself in the future.
Message received, I thought. Maybe there was more to God than I had thought. So that was how I spent the last 3 hours of my night. I kept the old worn Bible on my lap, and whenever Raish would start trying to worm his way back in, I would begin to read from it. It put him off talking, right up until the sky began to lighten. Then he turned to me, my eyes barely staying open, and delivered one final bit of crypticness.
I don't have much time. When you think back on this night, I want you to remember that you could have had more than this old stick ever. He growled out. As the first rays of light came up over the windowsill, he twisted violently, so violently that I thought he had broken his neck. He twitched a few more times, screaming hoarsely until he finally settled back into bed. I sighed in relief as he twitched again, realizing it was over as I packed the cross and the Bible back into the box, with the gun and the earplugs and the spray bottle. The spray bottle went in last, and as I secured the lid, Mr. Castleberry sat up and stretched grandly. He blinked and looked at me, smiling as he realized I was still there. I had a feeling you would be less easy to scare off. As promised, you'll pass with an A now. Here, he said, and to my surprise, he fished $200 bills out of his nightstand. What's this for? I give anyone who works the sundown shift $200 when they're done. There's more where that came from, if you'd like to come back. The number of people who come back, believe it or not, is surprisingly low. I asked him how he could afford this, and he smiled, laughing warmly. I don't teach for the money. I teach because it's what I love to do. My father set me up before I was born, something I don't think Raish knows. Money doesn't mean the same thing to demons that it does to us, and I think he just sees it as a thing I have. I don't covet it, so he doesn't see it as a vice. $200, I thought, for 12 hours of basically nothing. I could sit 3 nights with Mr. Castleberry and make what I make at the fast food place in a week. I'd have to think about this pretty hard, but I was definitely tempted to come back. I knew what I was in for now, so it would be easier a second time. I knew Raish would probably have more tricks, but maybe I'd be ready, now that I was prepared. Before I left that day, I asked him what the demon had given him to get such control after dark. Mr. Castleberry thought about it for a moment and finally decided to share the secret with me. My mother was sick, very sick, and I was looking for a miracle to make her better. Raishael came to me and offered me a deal. He would possess my body after dark, control me from sun up to sun down, and in exchange, my mother would be spared from the disease that was killing her. I agreed on the condition that he couldn't do anything that would take away my ability to be free during the day. He agreed, but it was all for nothing. What do you mean? I asked. Your mother lived, right? For a while. He didn't lie. He cured her of the cancer that was eating away at her. The cancer, however, had damaged her kidneys. She lived another 8 months before she died of renal failure. Let that be a lesson to you, should you decide to come back. Demons always promise the moon, but they don't tell you that the cheese is rotten. I left that room $200 richer, and maybe a little wiser, too. Wiser or not, it wasn't the last time I sat with Mr. Castleberry, or Raishael. You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story, or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad, Unicorn Hollow, and Army Dude for being our Spooky Ghost contributors. Thanks to Janet, Lee Kendall, Saikat, Ronda J, Sue Casper, and Valinator for being our Spooky Skeleton contributors. And thanks to Oh Snap, Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Stephanie Carrington, Tyler Parker, Cinnamon Fox,
Grim Reaper, TomBoiTopUwU, and Queen Sheebah for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. And a big thanks to Scott Donahue for being our Ghostly Writer tier contributor. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you'd like to support the channel, then come on down to Patreon or become a member on YouTube. Spooky Skeleton tier contributors, that's our $5 tier, get their spooky 12 hours early at 8:30 a.m. as opposed to 8:30 p.m. my time, of course. And while Ghostly Reading is only a tier that's available on Patreon, you get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one on your doorstep in, hopefully, a timely manner. If you'd like a book, we have many on Amazon. I've got links below if you'd like to follow those. Should get you to my page so you can buy any one of my 8 books I believe we're up to now. I'm sure they'd look really nice on your shelf, and I'll sign them for you if you can find me out in the wild. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.